On the Buzz Meter this Sunday, President Trump denounces NBC, even calls for scrutiny of its television license over a story alleging he wanted a dramatic boost in the nuclear arsenal.
No, I never discussed increasing it. I want it in perfect shape. That was just fake news by NBC, which gives a lot of fake news lately. And it's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write. And people should look into it.
Well, I have looked into it, and you might want to start looking into it too, Mr. President.
Did the story or the president's response go too far? As news outlets dig up new, even more troubling sexual assault and harassment allegations against Harvey Weinstein, the editor of The Hollywood Reporter is here on his interview with Weinstein's brother, calling him depraved. This says more actresses make more accusations, some of them on camera, like Dawn Dunning.
So he said, I have contracts for my next 3 films here, and I will sign them today, but I want you to have a threesome with me and my assistant.
And NBC struggles to explain why it didn't air Ronan Farrow's chilling exclusive, which wound up in a major magazine.
Why did you end up reporting this story for The New Yorker and not for NBC News?
Look, you would have to ask NBC and NBC executives about the details of that story.
What did journalists know about the Weinstein mess, and when did they know it? Laura Ingraham, Fox's newest primetime host, joins us on Hollywood hypocrisy and Beltway hypocrisy. Plus, Trump throws the NFL for a loss, and ESPN suspends the host who called the president a white supremacist, this time for tweeting against the Dallas Cowboys. Why are some critics saying the punishment is racially motivated? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. First, Harvey Weinstein was fired by his own company after the New York Times reported sexual harassment allegations against him over 3 decades, which he denies. Then came Ronan Farrow's devastating New Yorker article in which 3 women on the record say the movie mogul raped them, which again he denies. Now, more accusers are emerging just about every day, not just actresses, but journalists like Lauren Sivan.
And that's where he cornered me in this vestibule and leaned in and tried to kiss me, which I immediately rebuffed and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he immediately exposed himself and, began pleasuring himself. And I just stood there dumbfounded.
Weinstein is a major Democratic donor, and it took nearly 6 days for Barack Obama to say he and Michelle were disgusted and, quote, any man who demeans and degrades women in such fashion needs to be condemned and held accountable regardless of wealth or status. And for Hillary Clinton to say she was shocked and appalled by Harvey Weinstein.
It's good Clinton broke her silence. Of course, it is too bad she was one of the last to do so.
I just don't understand why the day this came out, she wasn't on Twitter condemning it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The fact that the Clintons and the Obamas embraced him, I think, is a dark mark on their record.
The former First Lady finally spoke about it publicly on CNN.
What was your reaction when you heard the news about Harvey Weinstein?
I was just sick. I was shocked. I was appalled. It was something that was just intolerable in every way.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com. Jessica Tarloff, senior director at Bustle, both are Fox News contributors, and Erin McPike, White House correspondent for Independent Journal Review. Fareed Zakaria didn't ask Hillary Clinton the obvious question, what took you so long?
He didn't. He did ask her about giving back some of the money that she'd taken from Weinstein, and she said she's going to bundle that into her yearly charitable giving. It's unclear where that would go or if it's on top of her normal 10% as she described. I do think that there's a question for Democrats more broadly. Is the party going to divest from this tainted money from Harvey Weinstein?
Do you feel like the media are pressing that question or kind of going easy on the DNC?
Well, so the DNC put out this ridiculous charade of a policy, which was they're going to give away 10% of it to groups devoted to electing Democrats, which is basically the DNC. And they got some positive headlines for it saying, oh, they're giving away the money. If the media is that easily fooled, then shame on them. There should be more pressure on that front.
Jessica, I'm glad that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are now speaking out against Harvey Weinstein, but it's hard to avoid the conclusion they were being uber cautious because Weinstein is not just a big-time Democratic donor, he threw fundraisers for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the actual cash amount that came directly from Harvey Weinstein was quite minimal comparatively, but he certainly has been a great friend of the Democratic Party and liberal causes. I mean, even his first ridiculous letter said, I'm going to focus my attention now on the NRA, like as if, you know, we want him with us in any way whatsoever. To the larger point here, I think that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were late to the game, and I think that the issue is not what we're going to do with the money, but what we're going to do actually with the ideology, because I believe strongly in the values of the Democratic Party being champions of women. I believe our policies are better for women across the board. And if we're not the first to the fire on issues like this, I think that it's hard for us to stand up there and say that.
Now, Republicans are sometimes reluctant when a conservative gets into this type of trouble, but what Harvey Weinstein did, and of course he was kicked out of the Academy Awards yesterday, should cut across partisan lines, right?
Yeah, it absolutely should. No, I don't think 6 days is all that long, but I do know that people who tend to defend Clinton on television, on Twitter, in the press, were waiting for a response and were kind of frustrated that the Clinton team wasn't giving them one on
There were
time.
stories about when is Hillary going to speak about this? If it had been some big Republican donor, it would have taken 6 minutes, 6 hours at the most.
Well, look, that's true, but Hillary Clinton is no longer running for president, and people do want her to go away, and President Obama is no longer president, so, you know.
All right, but she is on a book tour. All right, so and how does NBC let Ronan Farrow, who got a number of women to go on the record, 3 of them accusing Harvey Weinstein of rape, which, again, he denies anything non-consensual. Farrow's a special correspondent with NBC, former MSNBC host. How do you let him walk away with that scoop?
So, as a disclosure, I'm friends with Ronan, and I thought that he gathered, based on just what we know publicly, he gathered a lot of factual, reportable information on this story over many months. 8 women on the record. The pushback he got internally from NBC is shocking, and we've seen the dribs and drabs coming out from within the building. People angry at NBC, at their own network, for basically giving up this scoop and chasing him off to the New Yorker, which has very high editorial standards, and they ran the piece. So I think this looks terrible for NBC News, and I do want to very quickly give some credit to Rachel Maddow, which I don't often do. You played the clip at the top of the show. She asked him and pressed him on that issue on an NBC-owned network.
Yes.
Good for her.
It was the elephant in the room, and she didn't let it go. I just want to play for you, Jessica, one piece of audio tape. This is something that Ronan Farrow had months ago, because there's some dispute about how many of the women did he have on the record at the time. He was still doing the story for NBC. So this is Ambra Badalana Gutierrez, a model who 2 years ago had said that she was groped by Harvey Weinstein the day before. She wore a wire in a New York police sting. Let's listen.
Please come in now, and 1 minute, and if you want to leave, when the guy comes with my jacket, you can go.
Yesterday you touched my wrist.
Oh, please, I'm sorry, just come on, I'm used to that. Come on.
Are you used to that?
Yes, come in.
No, but I'm not used to that.
I won't do it again. Come on, sit here. Sit here for a minute, please.
No, I don't want to.
He admits the groping on the tape. How is that by itself not a story for NBC?
I don't know, and I don't know what Cy Vance was thinking either when he declined to prosecute.
He's the Manhattan District Attorney.
District Attorney, yeah. But adding on to what Guy was talking about, NBC also got scooped on the Access Hollywood tape because they waited on this with the Trump tape. Right. So clearly there are some problems there at the top at NBC about their decision, you know, to not go forward with these huge stories and stories that the American people need to be hearing about, whether it's the President of the United States of America or it's someone that's running Hollywood.
So I've worked at both NBC and CNN, both of their news departments. The Access Hollywood tape, you know, I don't know that we can say that the actual news department knew of the Access Hollywood tape. I think that's up for debate. But look, networks kill stories all of the time. It is frustrating at every network. CNN does not have a leg to stand on to go after NBC for not running that story. And my suspicion is that it had a lot more to do with the fact that they thought, oh, Ronan Farrow grew up in Hollywood and he is young, and they probably wanted to make him a star but didn't necessarily believe in his journalistic chops. There's a lot of that could have been going on.
Why do you say
well, why
CNN?
even gave him a show, though? And I mean, Ronan Farrow said that he had to go out and spend his own money to do some of this bidding for a crew because NBC wouldn't support him. Don't hire him in the first place if you don't think he has the chops to do it.
Just briefly, why do you say CNN doesn't have a leg to stand on?
Because I know they kill stories. I've seen it happen.
All right. We'll have to come back to that sometime. In fairness, NBC News President Noah Oppenheim told his staff, and the network put this out, that it was offensive that anyone would think NBC was covering up for a powerful person, and that, in his view, Ronan Farrow's story wasn't ready for prime time at the time he was dealing with NBC. But of course, weeks later, this incredibly well-documented piece shows up in the New Yorker. All right, so Do you think that too many journalists have perpetuated the myth of Harvey Weinstein, the mighty movie mogul, the guy who makes stars, the guy who wins Oscars, while basically looking away from conduct that we're hearing more and more was an open secret in New York and Hollywood?
Yeah, and one element of this story that I've been fascinated by is the late night comedians who jumped all over stories about, people at our network who got into trouble along these lines. And
who speak out against Trump regularly.
And Trump regularly. So, look, this is obviously harassment a problem not just in Hollywood, but elsewhere. It's the gusto and the immediacy with which some of these people went after in the media and in comedy after some targets, but not others. And some of the excuses now from Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers explaining why they pulled their punches, to me, do not hold water at all. And I think there's some human nature here. Going after friends and going after people who are powerful in your orbit is difficult. That's the truth to power.
And
that's
by the
tough.
way, NBC has business relationships with NBC Universal Pictures and Bravo with Weinstein's companies and that sort of thing. Now, it is hard, though, to nail down and document these kinds of things where it's often two people in a room. And I'm not being critical in any way of the women, and particularly those who are young, aspiring actresses, for not speaking out. But you have to have people who are willing to go on the record before you can report these kind of explosive charges.
Right. That's why everyone on both sides of the aisle should be praising these women who did find the courage to do that. And yes, it took some of them a few years to make sure that they had established their careers and they had the legs to stand on to do it. But the audio came out of Courtney Love back in 2005 saying, don't work for Harvey Weinstein. This was going to happen to you. And CAA banned her, lifetime ban. So when people blame the women, and I have been on other panels about this, where my opponent has come out and said, these women knew, Meryl Streep knew, Jane Fonda admitted she knew a year ago. Don't you dare talk about those women and put them down for what they did when you see what happened to a Courtney Love.
And this sets up my question to you, which is New York Times columnist Jim Rutenberg wrote about this, that there's a network of very aggressive public relations people and lawyers who guard the secrets of those who they work for, and that they keep this stuff out of public view, and then only major news organization, New York Times, New Yorker, which have lawyers and factors, can take this on.
Well, that's right. And look, a lot of very wealthy entities or people, when they foresee a crisis happening, will bring on a public relations firm so that they can fend off this sort of thing, which obviously we know happened with Harvey Weinstein before he was trying to stop the New York Times story.
And by the way, Harvey Weinstein on the cover of Time magazine looking like a villain, which is pretty much how he's been cast. Producer, predator, pariah. MediaBuzz at FoxNews.com if you want to write to us. Ahead, President Trump is talking about pulling TV licenses from offending networks, except it doesn't quite work that way. But when we come back, more on the Harvey Weinstein ugliness with the editor of The Hollywood Reporter on his latest exclusive. Many movie stars speaking out now that more than 30 women have made harassment or assault allegations against Harvey Weinstein, including Dawn Dunning.
So at that point, I fled from the room. I was scared at that point because he is a very domineering man. And sorry.
So how much did people in Hollywood and the media know about Weinstein's aberrant behavior? Joining us now from Los Angeles is Matt Bellany, editor of The Hollywood Reporter. And let's start with your remarkable interview with Bob Weinstein, published yesterday, in which he said his brother Harvey is depraved, that he's going through a waking nightmare, that they've barely talked for the last 5 years, that he knew his brother was philandering but not coercing, and that he himself was physically assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. How do you know that this isn't in part spin, distancing himself from this disaster?
We don't. I mean, obviously, the big question, and the first question I asked him was, he's your brother. How in the world could this have gone on without you knowing? And, he's making a distinction, believe him or not, between what everyone in the company knew, which was that he was a philanderer, he was traveling around the world, trying to sleep with women at all times of the day, but they weren't in the room with him, they say, so they don't know what actually happened in that room.
Right.
And
Bob Weinstein,
you have to believe him or not.
Yeah, and Bob Weinstein telling you when they had a physical altercation, this was a defining moment of cowardice for me on my part, and apparently it was a very emotional interview. Let me ask you also, Harvey Weinstein, well known, more journalists speaking out about this now, as very difficult for journalists to deal with. How did your last call with him go?
Well, I would speak with Harvey every once in a while, sort of par for the course in my job, and he was often threatening, sometimes charming. My last interaction with him after the Cannes Film Festival, we had an item about how the police had accosted him outside of a party. He was late, and he sort of passive-aggressively insinuated that he could buy my magazine and replace me as editor. It was one of those, like, you know, Harvey, you kind of are taken aback and like, did you just threaten to buy my magazine and have me fired? But that was the way he operated.
That doesn't sound passive-aggressive. That just sounds aggressive. So how this question is now swirling about, how many journalists knew, suspected, heard rumors in your town, in your circles, at the Hollywood Reporter, that Harvey Weinstein was a sexual predator?
I think, you know, that's a difficult question because you're asking, what did we know? What did we know? We had heard the stories. We had investigated it. In fact, about 2 years ago, we actually put a team of people on trying to find people who would tell us on the record what had happened to them. We even had a big whiteboard in the newsroom with all the different people who had worked at Miramax and the Weinstein Company. We had a list of actresses whose stories had kind of floated around Hollywood, and we tried to confirm it on the record, as many, many, many outlets did. And it wasn't until this breakthrough in the New York Times where actresses came forward and spoke on the record that the floodgates opened.
Right. We were saying a moment ago that without those on-the-record testimonies, it is very difficult to publish these kinds of accusations. But after cases that we've now all been through, involving Bill Cosby, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, all these Silicon Valley companies, do you think the climate has changed for the media in reporting on this, and perhaps also made it easier for women some of whom were traumatized by this, even got out of the business because of Harvey, to speak on the record?
I definitely think the culture has changed, and because of the examples you cited, that more women are feeling more comfortable to come forward. It's certainly a risky thing to do. It's a brave thing to do, and there are potential repercussions for women who do it. And the Courtney Love story is heartbreaking, but it is a change in the culture has happened, I think, and we would not have had these women coming forward about Harvey Weinstein had the others not come before it. As far as the media goes, you know, it's still a risky proposition to level accusations at a powerful figure, but I do believe that media is more likely to do these stories because of the place we are in the culture right now.
All right. Matt Bellany, I guess you get to keep your job with Harvey Weinstein banners now. Thanks very much for joining us from L.A.
Thank you.
Ahead, Laura Ingraham on the president, the press, and populism. But up next, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly speaks to reporters and throws a few jabs. The media have been saying that John Kelly, the president's new chief of staff, is growing frustrated in his job, and the general walked into the press room the other day to respond.
It is astounding to me how much is misreported. I will give you the benefit of the doubt that you are operating off of contacts, leaks, whatever you call them. But I would just offer to you the advice I'd say, maybe develop some better sources.
Get better sources, Guy Benson. So here's John Kelly saying basically, I'm sick of these leaks. You guys don't know what you're talking about. And he does that with that sort of aura of military command.
Yeah, and it's effective. If I were advising the White House, generally, I would advise them to do more of this, because we get all these stories weekly, at least daily, often, on palace intrigue and who's frustrated, who's on the brink of being out or whatever. And a lot of the times there's bad information, according to Kelly. The fact that they sent him out directly to respond in person and then answer a bunch of questions, giving new information to the press, I think it diffused a lot of it. He commands the room. I would love to see more of him and more top principals within the administration face the press frequently.
Can I just agree? That was a success. We can declare that White House press briefing a success because they did what they set out to do, which is shut down all of those rumors. So I agree with you, they should do that more often. But also, I would say he did note in that briefing that he has done 3 off-the-records, and some of the reporters in the room had violated the terms of those off-the-record meetings. What I would say is they don't put out a number of these principals as often as they should, but they do have very high-level principals doing off-the-record meetings all the time. And I would venture to say probably more than the Obama administration was doing this early.
Well, there are other senior administration officials who have told me that they're also very frustrated by these leaks, which often make the president look like he doesn't know what he's doing and makes various factions look good. But look, just because General Kelly comes out and says the stories are untrue doesn't mean he's not frustrated in his job dealing, for example, with the president's tweets. He's a good soldier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would halfway agree with the two of you about this. I think it was certainly a success in that you watch General John Kelly and you believe him and you believe in his service to this country, which he is continuing now in being part of this administration, a role that I don't think he certainly takes lightly, or one that I don't think that he wanted in the first place. There was a Politico piece a little while ago about how he doesn't talk to former chiefs of staff. He's the first one actually who's not part of that club. He wants to go about his business and get an incredibly tough job done. I think that what happened, which is similar to what happened with Tillerson last week after the maybe moron comment, which after this morning I think was totally a moron comment from what he said on the Sunday morning shows, is that the President of the United States of America marches these guys out there and makes them sing for their supper.
Oh, but hang on, though. The idea that John Kelly is going to be bullied by anyone, even if it's the president, into going out and lying and lying?
Oh, no, I don't. No, I said I think that he was telling the truth about it, and I agree with Howie's point. He's certainly frustrated, and I think that comes through, and frustrated with the press and the leaks. But you don't think that President Trump said to his chief of staff, hey, everyone's saying that you hate it here and that you're going to quit. Maybe you could go out there and do a press conference. I'd really appreciate it, and he's a good soldier.
It was reported that the president did suggest him to do that.
Just like what Tillerson.
I'm going to get frustrated if you guys don't stop because I got to get a break.
Okay.
And, somebody is feeding the press these leaks, whether they're fully accurate or not, another question. All right, next on MediaBuzz, Laura Ingraham on Harvey Weinstein, whether the GOP is breaking apart, and a few words about her new show here at Fox. And later, the president accuses NBC of pure fiction, and the network stands its ground. With an explosion of news from the Harvey Weinstein mess to the president's escalating attacks on the press, I sat down with Laura Ingraham, who's launching a primetime show called The Ingraham Angle here at Fox, and is the author of the new book, Billionaire at the Barricades: The Populist Revolution from Reagan to Trump. Laura Ingraham, welcome.
Good to see you.
With the absolutely disgusting allegations coming out now about Harvey Weinstein, how much of an open secret was this in the media and movie world, and did you know about it?
I had heard about it when I was at the Sundance Film Festival, I think covering it the year I covered it. I believe it was the same year I covered it for MSNBC, where I used to work. I was doing like a stand-up piece, interviewed a bunch of celebrities. A couple of friends of mine were in the movie business, and they mentioned, I didn't even know who he was, to tell you the truth, but they said, this guy, da-da-da, and they used the name Harvey, and it's like, well, he raped this girl. And I'm like, what? And it stuck in my mind, but years later, I remembered it, and I thought, that's kind of interesting. And then when this started coming out, I thought, okay, and then it started, something happened at the Sundance Film Festival. And so it was weird. I just happened to be there.
Right.
But I think
if you knew about
I knew about it, I wasn't even in the industry. If I knew about it, then I think, frankly, a lot of these actors and actresses that are coming forward saying, oh, this is horrible, this is disgusting, they were making jokes about it on 30 Rock. They were making oblique reference to it at the Oscars with their little offhand Harvey comments.
So then it was funny.
Tee-hee, ha-ha. Young lives were destroyed. Careers were ruined. Rose McGowan was never the same afterward. And there were many other stories like that, and not just at the hands of Weinstein. This happens across every industry. It happens both to women and men. Mm-hmm. Young men have been subjected to this. And I said on Twitter the other day that to some extent he's like a kind of a mob boss. He has a lot of capos who protect him. And he has a lot of people bought off and afraid. Right. And that's kind of what happened.
Another big press story this past week has been the president slamming little Bob Corker on Twitter. Corker coming back and saying Trump is leading us on a path to World War III. So now you have the Republican president and the Republican Senate Foreign Relations chairman in this war of words. Is this overplayed, or is it an important story?
I think it's entirely predictable. Bob Corker was never comfortable with Donald Trump. He didn't want Trump to win. I like Corker as a person. I think he's a nice guy, but He's not a Trump guy. I mean, he's more of a Bush Republican, and that's fine. The problem is Bush Republicanism didn't win in November. It was soundly defeated. It was defeated in Florida and Texas and Michigan and all over the country.
Whether he was a Trump guy or not, it doesn't make it any less newsworthy because it is unusual, since they both happen to be of the same party, that it has gotten to this level.
Well, yeah. Well, the problem is he decides to go into the White House, ask Donald Trump to support his candidacy. I think Donald Trump said, "I'll do it. I'll help you," and then he goes, running in media interviews and basically is maligning the president. Back and forth, it's not what I would do.
Yeah.
But this is not the story. The story is, which path is the right path for the country? Should we do the same kinds of policies that got us into this foreign policy situation with Iran, with the Middle East, military intervention, the rise of China, North Korea? Donald Trump didn't get us into this problem. He is trying to get us out. So I understand the old foreign policy establishment is very uncomfortable, but Trump won in November and they did not.
A lot of that is in billionaire at the barricades, including the subject of immigration. Now, you're generally supportive of President Trump.
Yes.
You spoke at his convention, but when he didn't push for immediate funding of the border wall, you tweeted, build the wall, or maybe not really.
Yep.
So there were times when you differ with this president.
Yeah, I differ with him on that. I didn't love the way the travel ban was rolled out. They obviously made a mistake with that. They had to redo it. Ultimately, the court just decided not to take the case on writ of certiorari, so that's going to stand now.
Is it more effective for you to differ with him, to send him a message by saying it to the television camera as opposed to talking to him privately?
I don't know. I really don't know. I speak my mind. I did with George W. Bush, who I really liked, and I campaigned for him, and we had a real break at the end. I mean, I had a break with the Bushes because of amnesty, because of Harriet Miers, and a lot of other things. So my allegiance is to this populist conservative agenda that he ran on successfully, and if he continues to advance it and push for it, the voters are going to reward him. And if this economy continues to grow, which he does not get any credit for, continues to grow, he's going to be in good shape in 2020.
Why did so many of your fellow conservative commentators oppose Donald Trump in the campaign, and so many of them remain opposed to President Trump?
They're not populists. They're elitists. They're globalists. A lot of them. They were in the Reagan coalition because we had to defeat the Soviet Union, and I think that Soviet threat, and Reagan's own charm and experience as governor of California, he was able to hold it all together. The populists, the social conservatives, the fiscal hawks, the defense hawks.
Now, I want to leave a little time to talk about the Ingram angle. It debuts on October 30th here at Fox, 10 p.m. Eastern. You've been saying that your show is going to be different. Go.
Politics and the rest of life. Politics is important.
The rest of life, that's included?
Yeah, well, little other things. There's a lot that happens throughout the day that I think because of the rush of the political news cycle, we might not cover as in depth as I'm trying to do on this new show. So everything from parenting to Hollywood to the social pressure that young kids are under today to the internet, constant presence of screens in our lives. There's a lot to discuss, to what's happening to the understanding of gender and gender bending. What does that do to our understanding of human relationships? So there's a lot to discuss. Some of it is left and right, some of it's not. And I think we have an obligation to cover everything. I'm going to try to do it from all angles. I'm a conservative. I always will be.
Right, but the left and right debate is getting a little tired.
Well, and I'm going to bring on different voices on these topics. We have a lot of great people at Fox that we're going to hear from, but there are new voices out there. There are young people that have a lot to say. There's inspiring stories, infuriating stories. We're going to try to hit all of them and also make people laugh every now and then, Holly.
That would be great. By the way, you have a primetime TV show now, a daily syndicated radio show. You're a single mother with 3 kids. Do you not require much sleep?
I don't sleep much. I got to sleep more. And apparently, according to Sean Hannity, I have to learn how to nap, which my mother never got me to do, but I guess I'm going to have to learn to do that. So
Hour naps. It's the secret to successful television career. Laura Ingram,
Thanks, Howie. Great to see you.
Good luck with the show.
Thanks.
Got to learn how to nap. Ahead on MediaBuzz, ESPN suspends its most controversial host, but not for calling President Trump a white supremacist. But first, Trump says it's a disgrace that journalists can write whatever they want. Is that right?
These are very, very dishonest people. In many cases, I call it fake media. It's fake. It's so much fake news. And we have to understand.
You agree with that? Fake news?
You know,
President Trump with Sean Hannity the other day has escalated his attacks on the press, now suggesting government action may be needed. When NBC reported he had asked top advisors for a tenfold increase in the nuclear arsenal, he called it pure fiction.
The president dismissed our reporting, saying it's not true and that our sources are made up. Those sources, however, do exist. In fact, 3 of them were in the room when the president talked about dramatically increasing the number of U.S. nukes.
And here's what the president tweeted. Network news has become so partisan, distorted, and fake that licenses must be challenged and, if appropriate, revoked. Not fair to public. We're back with the panel. Guy, it happens to be a fact that the FCC doesn't regulate national networks, only local stations. And even there, it's supposed to be on the basis of community service, not news content. What do you make of President Trump going there?
So, as we exhibited on this show just a few minutes ago, NBC and other networks are not above serious criticism and sometimes really maybe bashing sometimes.
Fine,
right?
and the president has every right to go after any news organization or story he wants,
and
but
to challenge the stories and to go after their veracity. Taking it the next step, talking about licensing and these sort of vague mused threats about shutting down speech that you don't like is off base, over the top, and wrong. And I would just point out, if you're agreeing with him now and you're a conservative, recall the reaction at this network when President Obama's administration tried to marginalize Fox. There was a hue and cry here and elsewhere. That was right. This is a step further from Trump, and it's wrong.
Right. But maybe the president was not actually serious about TV licenses. This is his way of venting when he gets mad at the media.
Yeah, but he's the President of the United States of America, and people listen to him and they believe him, even when he lies. I mean, when you hear the chanting and the like woo-ha right in that interview alone, you know how Trump's base feels about him. You know that they think that Hillary Clinton lied about everything and Donald Trump told the truth about everything, even though we know that the facts do not bear that out. And it's extremely dangerous. It's authoritarian talk, dictator talk. Guy and I have spoken about this a million times, that he doesn't seem to have a strong conception of what the First Amendment really means.
And speaking of the First Amendment, that quote from the president, it's disgraceful that the press can write whatever they want. Well, sometimes it is disgraceful what the press writes, but it doesn't mean they don't have the right to do it.
They do. It's the First Amendment. But just venting is becoming a really big problem. Some of the stories that have come out since have shown, well, we know from the stock market, in fact, that the 3 companies that own the broadcast networks actually lost a little bit of value after he made that comment. The other thing I would point out is that Tom Wheeler, who was an FCC commissioner under President Obama, said that it could also be taken as instruction to supporters who could act on his behalf. In other words, that conservative groups could challenge the licenses of some of the local networks because of what Trump is saying.
Local stations owned by Comcast.
So this venting is a problem.
All right, let me just move on because I want to get to the Iran situation. The Washington Post reports the other day, based on sources, the president was livid, that he threw a fit with top advisors who told him that he should accept the Iran nuclear deal negotiated under Obama. So they came up with this plan where he decertified it, as he did on Friday, but didn't derail it. Congress can act. And the press kind of hammered Trump about it. Those kinds of inside stories always seem designed to make the president look bad.
Yeah. The press hammered him for it is sort of like every day.
Yeah.
Dog bites man, press hammers Trump. They always do it. I think the balance that the administration has reached on this issue is a smart one. It's a good one. And the idea that the president would be mad that his advisors are saying keep the deal that he called the worst deal ever repeatedly on the campaign trail, of course that would frustrate him. They seem to have found a middle ground and an accommodation that applies more pressure on Congress and the regime in Iran.
It's okay for presidents to get mad sometimes, but a lot of these stories sort of portray him as a hot-headed.
This one never seems happy.
Okay,
though.
but you tell me another president, whatever you think about the Iran deal or anything else, who's had so many sensitive meetings and even conversations with foreign leaders leaked to the press by people who ostensibly work for him.
Absolutely not. And I've gone after this a number of times. It's unprecedented and it's dangerous to our national security. Everyone knows that I have a lot of problems with President Trump, his policies and the way that he conducts himself. But he is the President of the United States of America. We need to protect him in that way. I do think that I've actually never said this, but I agreed with Steve Bannon in his interview with Charlie Rose, where he said that if you disagreed with the president, you resign before you go on TV and ridicule. And what happened with Gary Cohn about the Charlottesville comments.
Let me just get Aaron here on this last point, which is, and with the president also halting key Obamacare subsidies, and now part of the media refrain is, well, he's only doing this to destroy Barack Obama's legacy. Chris Matthews said he was doing it out of spite. Maybe this is what he believes.
It clearly is what he believes, but when you're not fixing the problem and instead you're making it worse, then it's clear that he's just trying to maintain a campaign.
That's a political judgment on your part. that he's making it worse.
Well, I think that's been very clear.
There are a lot of Republicans who are saying that he's making it worse.
Ruling here. The media is missing the boat. They're talking about political motivations and what he wants to do to Obama. A federal court said it's unconstitutional and illegal. What choice does he have but to stop these illegal payments?
And I have no choice but to stop this segment, but that's a good point. Guy Benson, Jessica Tarlow.
Thank you so much for having us.
Aaron McPike, thank you for being here. After the break, the NFL gives ground under pressure from the president, and despite the pundits who called the issue a loser. When Jemele Hill, the co-host of ESPN's SportsCenter, called President Trump a white supremacist and a bigot, the network did nothing other than saying, well, it was inappropriate. But after Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones said he'd bench any player who doesn't stand for the anthem, Hill tweeted that he was hurting his players, especially black players, and suggested, stop watching and buying their merchandise, and if you feel strongly about Jerry Jones' statement, boycott his advertisers. ESPN suspended her for 2 weeks, saying this was a second violation of its social media rules. Joining us now from Atlanta, Will Leach, senior writer for Sports on Earth and a contributor at New York Magazine. And so, Will, Al Sharpton was out there after Jemele Hill got benched for 2 weeks for essentially saying boycott the Cowboys. And he's saying this is an outrage and she has every right to speak out and we're going to stand by her. How is this racial?
Well, first off, I can't speak to that point. I can say that the suspension was a little bewildering. I mean, I know that it's kind of popular to misrepresent people's points for political gain. It's very strange to see that. But that's not actually what she did not say boycott the Cowboys. What she was talking about was a larger point, the idea that a lot of people were criticizing, say, a Dak Prescott, a quarterback for the Cowboys, for people that support, that are against Trump and support Prescott and support a lot of African-American athletes. They were saying he should kneel. Why doesn't he do it? Why doesn't he fight Jerry Jones? Or like push back on his owner. What she was saying is trying to explain why it's difficult for a quarterback to do that.
All right,
and so you should not bash a quarterback.
I disagree with you. She does say stop watching and buying their merchandise. But whatever her message, what part of don't embarrass ESPN on social media does she not understand? She's not just speaking for herself. She is a major ESPN host.
Well, it's strange, but she's hired to have commentary, and I know we'd love to pretend that politics and sports are separate. Clearly, the president doesn't feel that way. So the idea that she's not supposed to comment on this major issue, I think it's ESPN putting her and frankly other commentators there in this weird kind of straitjacket where their job is to comment on what's going on. What is a bigger story in the NFL right now than what's going on with the protests and what's going on with Trump? The idea that she's not supposed to comment on that, or more to the point, kind of guess until afterward where the line is. I think that's a pretty tough spot for her. And I think it's, again, not just a tough spot for her, but I think everybody there.
Let me move along here. So President Trump got kicked around by many in the media for going after the NFL over protesting players. Now Roger Goodell says their players are going to have to stand for the anthem. So fair to say the president put some points on the board?
I certainly think he believes he put some points on the board. He did put some pressure on it. Goodell actually did push back against that statement and say, I think there's going to be a vote among owners this week. Goodell met with the Dolphins to kind of talk about some of their social justice protests. But there's there's no been actual edict yet. Now, there could be one this week
but
from the NFL. But
don't you think that is just spin on the part of the NFL commissioner? I mean, when this first happened, he came out and issued a statement criticizing President Trump for pushing this issue. Now, you can argue whether it's technically a rule change or not, but now he's changed his tone at the very least.
I think certainly he did. Listen, he didn't come out like, "Hey, go protest, fight Trump" in the beginning, and he's not saying no one can do it now. Listen, you're not going to find someone like me particularly eager to defend Roger Goodell. Certainly, the messaging has always been an issue for him. He never quite gets it right, and I think this is a good example of him getting it wrong on both ends by not coming out strong either before or after the statement. It's kind of wishy-washy, and frankly, it allows both sides to claim victory. It allows Trump to say, "Yeah, I got him," and allows the players to say he stood up for us. I think it's generally kind of the muddy problem that Goodell has.
I've got half a minute. Do you think the media underestimated the resonance of President Trump taking on this issue of kneeling players, the way in which it would resonate with many Americans?
I think that they thought it was silly, to be honest, and I think there's clearly an idea that there should be larger issues to focus on. But I also think part of this is ESPN ratings are down, NFL ratings are down. I would argue these things are independent of this, but it certainly makes a convenient data point for people to argue the other direction.
All right, you can spike the football on that one. Will Leach, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still to come, why Facebook's virtual tour of Puerto Rico turned into such a fiasco.
I think what's most important to my viewers is ensuring that America remains a country with its own voice, its own traditions, its own history, and that's what I'm going to do. Don't miss the Ingram Angle, premiering October 30th on the Fox News Channel.
What on earth was Mark Zuckerberg thinking, promoting a Facebook app with an upbeat virtual tour of Puerto Rico where there has been death and so much destruction?
One of the things that's really magical about virtual reality is you can get the feeling that you're really in a place. It feels like we're really here in Puerto Rico, where it's it's obviously a tough place to get to now.
Wow. People are still fighting for their lives on the hurricane-battered island. I mean, that goes beyond tone-deaf to outright insensitive. Now, Zuckerberg later apologized, saying, I also wanted to share the news of our partnership with the Red Cross to help with the recovery. Reading some of the comments, I realized this wasn't clear. I'm sorry to anyone this offended. I'm glad Facebook has added a dislike button for this sort of thing. That's it for this edition of Media Buzz. I'm Howard Kurtz. Glad you could join us. We hope you will check out our Facebook page. Give us a like. We post a lot of original content there, and I try to a lot of the comments and questions. Also, follow me on Twitter at Howard Kurtz. Continue the dialogue. And if you want to email us, MediaBuzz@foxnews.com. Stick to the media. I try to look at the comments. We're back here next Sunday. See you then, 11 Eastern, with the latest buzz.